With the skills gap increasing, it's more important than ever to train your staff effectively and efficiently. Offensive Security provides training for your organization designed by the same minds behind Kali Linux. Here are 2 recent offerings from OffSec. OffSec Academy gives you the chance to earn industry-leading OSCP certification with dedicated one-on-one mentoring. You can also try Proving Grounds Enterprise, created exclusively by Offensive Security's InfoSec experts for highly realistic simulated networks. Visit securityweekly.com/offsec to learn more. PlexTrack is the platform that helps cybersecurity practitioners get the daily work done. Red teams can create reports in half the time and track risk to resolution with the blue team. Teams can centralize remediation efforts across all scans, assessments, and audits. Effectively communicate risk in real time through simple visualizations, scanner and ticketing integrations, and robust analytics. PlexTrack is perfect for collaboration across all teams. Visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrack to claim your free month. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Our next live webcast will be on March 18th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, where we're going to get Linux and nerdy, or nerdy with Linux. Learn how to prepare Linux hosts for unexpected threats with Capsulate. Brendan Edwards is an outstanding security researcher and very much a Linux nerd, and will be joining us for a webcast. So make sure you go to securityweekly.com/webcast. Register now. Check out the archive at securityweekly.com/on-demand. I think building a PC is very much a hacker thing. Like, you really hack things together, and there's multiple hacker kind of aspects to it, because you balance cost with what you want in there, and you find deals and ways to put things together.
Yeah, you do.
Right,
and you got to make it work,
and you got to make it. You got to put it all together.
Oh, I bought the wrong. It doesn't fit. Where's the hacksaw?
There's always a couple of things in your build. You're like, I wasn't anticipating that, and I think that's part of the fun, actually.
And it's always that $3 cable that you have to wait 4 days from
Exactly.
Yeah, which drives you absolutely crazy. Hey, Paul, don't forget.
Hey, Joff is here. Yeah, welcome, Joff. You're rocking the awesome T-shirt. I love that. My other computer is your computer.
My other computer is your computer.
I love it.
Joff,
welcome. Glad you could join us tonight, and for this segment too. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And Joff, ironically, I own that domain. My other computer is your.computer.
Nice.
No, seriously, I do.
That's awesome, Larry.
Larry, I had to refrain from our domain acquisition spurious activity because it was starting to get expensive.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Starting?
Yeah, not to derail Paul's segment, but I think I probably pay, $100 a month to GoDaddy, where all my stuff is registered. But anybody want to buy a domain?
You got some cool domains. Yeah, maybe in the next segment we'll auction off some domains.
Done that.
Larry, you should look into an unlimited license.
Yeah, buy in bulk. Certainly, the pandemic has shaped how you build a PC today for a lot of different reasons. One of those being limitation on parts. Also, not having to travel and carry my computer with me seemed like a good time to build some PCs. So I actually built one for my kids. The other one I actually did buy a PC that was all together, and actually I'm pretty happy with it. And I was able to get one of the newer graphics cards with one of those pre-built systems, and it's actually pleasantly surprised. For my workstation, however, I decided to build something, and really the only reason I did is because I found a processor that would work, that we'll talk about. So that's one reason why I wanted to build the PC. The other one was, I think Apple products are too restrictive and lack some of the versatility. Haven't been an Apple person in some time. If you use it and it works for you, that's great. I also wanted enough performance to build out lab stuff. Software, virtual environments, Docker, VMware, whatever I was going to encounter in security work, security research, I didn't want to be limited by my PC. This is how I justify building it.
Yeah, so you got to write it off somehow.
It's exactly. I mean, Doug and I were talking about this earlier over dinner. We were like, I kind of just built this because I wanted it, not because I necessarily you just do it because it's cool and you wanna do it, right?
Of course you do.
Yeah,
of course you do.
You can try and justify I'm gonna run a lot of VMware and stuff, and so I need
go out and buy a $300 Dell toaster desktop right? If you just need a desktop. It's like when you get in there and go, I just dropped I tell my wife I just spent $5,000 on 2 video cards and a motherboard.
Right?
And
yeah.
Why do you need that?
Because
benchmarking.
I need it. Right.
Isn't the follow-on question, what did you buy for me, dear?
Yes, exactly. Always take what you buy and double it.
Look what I bought you.
Yes. I do have slides too, Johnny. I don't know how you want to mix the slide. Oh, there you go. So I do have some slides. And all my slides... Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Johnny. So the slides, as well as a link to the complete build that I did on PCPartPicker.com, as well as my slides, are all in the show notes for this episode. So all the costs, the exact thing on how to build it is there. So I wanted hardware that was compatible with Linux, which, I mean, when you're building a PC, most things are compatible with Linux unless it gets weird.
Yeah, be careful.
I also wanted enough power to handle many connected devices. If I wanted to add some USB devices, mostly my power-hungry USB devices are USB DACs and things like that. I've got a couple of DACs that I connect to the system that need the data bus speed, as we were just having that conversation with Joff just before the top of this segment, and audio devices. Then you've got keyboards, mice, speaker phones, conference phones, all the things. My previous PC, which I really loved, it was a System 76 Thelio, great, awesome computer. I ran out of expansion slots, and I overtaxed the power supply, so I upgraded the video card, and there just wasn't enough power to go around.
Yeah.
So you'll see here, adding that 1200 watt power supply really gave me the ultimate in flexibility. So that was the other driver behind me wanting to build a new PC. Just talk a little bit about the technology. I really was looking at the AMD processors. Everything I read, and like you mentioned, benchmarks. Take that with a grain of salt. Benchmarks are just that. They're benchmarks. Yep. They're not how the PC behaves or performs in the real world. It is very much a benchmark. But I was researching heavily AMD processors. They've got a lot of new great lines. I'm not sure cost-wise. I guess it depends on which line you're in and which comparisons you're making as to whether or not they're a better value. But I wanted to go with AMD. Now, the newer chipsets of AMD that aren't in the Threadripper series, which is what I ended up using, are, I think, some of the best bang for your buck. So value. In other words, what you get for performance for what you're paying for it is just awesome. I think it's one reason, even if there was more stock available, they'd probably still be pretty limited, because you can go spend $800 on a new AMD Ryzen 9 series, or even 5, 7, or 9 in the 5000 series, which is their newer one, right. So 59 something. Those are awesome processors.
Yeah,
good luck getting them, because I couldn't find them anywhere.
So it's the problem. Aside from being able to get them, are there any downside to going with the AMD?
I haven't found any. Doug, I know you've done a lot of PC builds as well.
Traditionally, so I have this sort of like now old man bias thing, like because in the old days AMDs were hot.
They ran hot.
They were always cheaper, but they ran really hot. And I've built lots of everything. So I've built everything from servers down to PCs. I built AMDs, Intels, you name it. We built it. And I got into this thing where I didn't like the AMDs because they were so hot. But when I wanted to overclock, they were the overclock kings.
Yeah.
So when we were building overclockers back in the late 90s, early 2000s, totally obsessed with AMD. They had more overclocking capability. You could do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they were cheaper. They were hot, but I'm going to overclock. It's going to be hot no matter what you do. So I'm already getting ready to hook an industrial air conditioner to my CPU. So
you're using lots of fans.
I got into this Intel thing because we were really trying to build now not overclockers, but we had these. I used to be student contests, and like, okay, the benchmark wasn't a benchmarking software. It'd be like, what's the video game that's the hardest thing to run today? And we're going to run these against each other and see who gets 30 frames a second, 60 frames a second, and so on. And I really got into Intels because I felt they were more stable, but that did change just a few years ago.
Yeah, I think it was a few years ago.
And today, I'm kind of just in the middle on it. I was just like you. I was looking at this recently, and I always look because I try to be fair. And I really couldn't see a dramatic difference in the two, and overclocking's dead. So, I mean, the advantage that was there is not an issue anymore. Right. The heat's not really an issue anymore. No. And
you'll see what I added for cooling.
But price-wise, there's now they're in that. There's that Intel, AMD. They're also kind of in the same little cloud now.
So I'm kind of curious. Paul, did you get into some liquid cooling at all?
I did.
Or are you staying with airflow?
Yeah, I'll show you the self-contained liquid cooling system that I used. I find they're pretty much commodity now and tend to work really well. I did liquid cooling 20 years ago, and there was a lot of leaking involved. It was not a good experience.
And liquid leaking on electronics is not a good thing.
No, it's bad.
It usually wasn't conductive, but sometimes it was.
Yes,
I had some that leaked everywhere, and there was a big messy puddle, and it didn't hurt anything. And then I had one that leaked, and there was shorts, and the building power went out, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So I will talk about the liquid cooling a bit in an upcoming slide. Also, the graphics card. This one for me, I think, for security use cases, I like going NVIDIA because I think if I wanted to do some password cracking, whether I had just one or two video cards, people build crazy systems. I stick with the NVIDIA. I really wanted an RTX 30 series. Again, I think this goes back to the money that you pay for the processing that you get. One reason why RTX 30 series cards are coveted, but there's also supply chain issues abound. So you really can't get them. So I picked up a used one back in December, and that's what I ended up going with, and I'll show you what that looked like. I did build a system that I could upgrade moving forward if I wanted to. I could add two if I really want. I know you're a big fan of the. If you're gonna have one, why not have two? You gotta have two.
I just can't live with myself.
Right. Storage.
Can I ask a stupid question, Paul?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Because I'm thinking back the last time I built a system which was out of cardboard and duct tape, but back in the day, the convention was if you're going to go out and buy a system and you had the option to build it, just get as much as you can for the newest, the best, and the bestest and the greatest that you can while you can. So my stupid question is, when you say you're building a system, are you actually buying the component parts and putting it together, or are you just selecting the specs and somebody puts it together and ships it to you?
Yeah, no, I'm buying the parts, putting it together. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Just checking.
Yep.
Thank you.
USB again was important to me.
I built a cabin once.
You can build lots of things. Cabins.
Could it do 60 frames a second?
Right.
It's got a fireplace.
Can you play Fortnite on it in full HD? USB was important. The motherboard, I wanted to make sure it had all or most of the USB standards that are out there. I think you're equally as confused when you look at the PCI, not PCI compliance as Jeff would talk about, but the PCI interface standard, PCI bus standard, thank you, as well as the USB standards are always like version numbers with generations with all kinds of monikers that I always have to look up to keep it all straight. But I want a motherboard that had the latest USB standards and as many of them as I could find.
And Paul,
that was my first
Thunderbolt?
PCI.
So Paul, did you add Thunderbolt to that list as well?
No, I did not. Is Thunderbolt is that a separate protocol from like USB 3.2 Gen 1 or something like that? Is that?
Yeah, it typically in many cases you'll find, and I just learned this yesterday from Jay Beal, that in many cases USB and Thunderbolt will use the same physical port, but it is in fact a distinct protocol.
Right.
And Thunderbolt is significantly higher bandwidth, especially when you're starting to talk 4K displays, because Thunderbolt specifically allocates like 8 megabits worth of bandwidth or 8 gigabits worth of bandwidth. I forget how much. Specifically for displays that can't be used for something else.
Gotcha.
So my understanding is USB 3.1, and I just looked it up, is maxed out at 10 gigabit saturation, right? So Thunderbolt may have an advantage on that.
And it's only on Intel. Some Dimitri just said that on Discord. So
yeah.
And USB-C port can actually be a Thunderbolt protocol port carrier, which is very confusing because USB-C can also be a PD carrier, Thunderbolt, and USB-C 3.2. But that depends on your North Bridge and your CPU.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of wacky, isn't it? I mean, it almost feels like they overdid themselves there. I know they were going for that ubiquitous all-in-one port, but it is. I mean,
slices it, dices it, makes julienne fries.
All great points because it deserves, when you're talking about the PCI bus and your USB system, do your research and do your homework because it's very confusing. because the different monikers for all of the different standards are different, and the bus speeds are all different. So you make sure you spec that out.
And
if you
think carefully on when you're first planning, what are you going to connect to this thing?
Yes.
You know, and always think about the next couple of years, because a lot of times people build something and they say, well, I'm going to save my money, and then next year I'm going to buy that right. 4K monitor, and then they don't have the connectors for it or something like that. So definitely, as you make those lists, kind of include your little sort of pipe dreamy wishes over here. Like, I'd really like to add this in the near future. And then make sure that what you're buying is going to support it. Just like if you say, well, I'm not going to be able to live with myself if I don't have a 3060 card.
Yeah.
And, and then you don't plan for that, and then you don't have enough power.
Plan your power,
or whatever. So always try to think ahead, because how long are you going to keep this system? Is it going to be there for, for me, it's like 3 years to 5 years tops. I just get the itch and I have to build a new one.
And I find Threadripper and Xeon tends to last a lot longer.
Oh, I've got systems sitting in my house that are, that are 20 years old that would still be just fine. You can put them up today, but I mean, I know I'm going to build something new.
Right.
I'm not going to build standard.
I think it's one of those things that you need to, when you're building it, and Paul, I'd be interested to hear your reaction to this, but go big or just don't play, because
I agree.
You just might as well go best of the best while you can at that moment where you're diving in.
Right. I mean, you do have to live within a budget as well.
Sure.
And I'll show you some of the sacrifices sacrifice is maybe not the right word, but compromises that I made to get more of what I wanted versus more of maybe what a gamer would want. Might have made some different choices in that arena. For example, RAM. Since my goal was, I'm like, I just really want to be able to run VMs and not have to worry about the fact that I'm also running Slack, Teams, Discord, and Chrome, which all by itself eat a lot of RAM and CPU by themselves.
Which is sad that you are saying just that, because I read that slide and I'm like, he needs RAM for Slack, Discord, Teams. Like, God, what have we come to?
I know. It's awful to think about, but it's very true. And I wanted to be able to run VMs while I'm on a call, in other words, with Teams. I want to be able to spin up VMs and go validate things or run some tasks in the background and just not have to worry about. So I'm like, RAM, max it out. If you're building a desktop, again, if you're speccing your power out, excuse me, there's no reason why you shouldn't just max out the RAM. Laptops, different. If your battery life you care about, you're going to want to do some more specific research as to how much RAM and how that impacts battery life.
Building laptops a whole different animal.
I don't know if I would build a laptop.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like the challenge is to move from what you built to like now put that in a 2U rack case, and let's see what you see what you got.
That's because
it gets really weird
when you've got a full. So this is a full ATX motherboard in a mid tower, ATX.
Oh, so you were pushing yourself,
yeah. Is it a full tower or a mid tower? I forget what they call it.
Hey, I go big on the cases too. I'm like, this thing it's going to sit over there under that table, so I don't care if it's
a great point. You should, I think, just go with the bigger case and a bigger motherboard, and it's
easier to work on.
With.
Right. Later, when you want to add something, you're not going, oh, if I only had room, get the hacksaw. Believe me, I've got the hacksaw
I've done it. I use a Sawzall, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I've sawed stuff out of a case. But I mean, I like to go with those big cases because, like I said, I'm not going to move it. It's not a LAN party machine or something.
No.
So my plan is it's going to sit over there in the corner. I'm not going to move it, hopefully, until I get rid of it. And it's so much easier to work on if you can get your hands inside of it than you're trying to work on. I mean, I built 2Us and stuff like that. I even built a 1U once, but that's a nightmare. And you're trying to run.
You got riser cards and
big case. It makes it easy.
So on this slide, this is what I built. And again, I linked to this in the show notes. And I'll walk through all of the components individually. Now, keep in mind, the reason I wanted to display this all on one slide was that some of these prices fluctuated, even since I've built it. Some of the prices went up. Some of the prices went down.
Well, some of these some coin.
Some of these, I mean, when you're doing a Threadripper build like I did with 256 gigs of RAM, just those two components alone, you're in north of $4,000 at that point.
I was going to say the RAM alone is going to cost you a bunch. So.
Yeah. And like I said, some of these prices have fluctuated. Some of the availability has gone away. The Be Quiet 1200 watt power supply, it actually is $249. So PC Part Picker, I think, is struggling as availability keeps changing, and I think everyone's trying to change their websites for whatever reason to keep up with demand on both ends of the spectrum. But it does list for $249, and at this time it said no price was available, but B&H Photo Video did have them in stock at $249, which I think is even where I ordered it from as well. So,
ooh, I like that you put a separate dedicated USB 3.1 card in there. That's a good idea.
I did. I wanted that for my audio devices. That card's actually not working right now. I don't know if I got a bad card or missing some configuration. But yeah, I am going to return that one, swap it out, see if it was a bad card, and get that working, because I did want to. I think for things that we do as security professionals, and also especially if you're an audiophile, you can never have enough USB bus and power.
Yeah, you got to have throughput,
right?
man.
Yeah.
You got to be able to. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's the build. Go ahead, Larry.
So it's funny. I'm looking at this list, and just about 10 years ago, when I was really getting heavy into the IT consulting work and the security consulting work, I built a system for doing password cracking. It ultimately ended up being for running VMs and not having any GPU in it, because I was going to buy those later. And it was my VMware server.
Yep.
That hosted everything.
Is that a Xeon?
It is a 24-core Xeon.
Yep. Yeah. And it lasts you 10 years.
Those things have legs,
256 gigs of RAM.
Yep.
And I think at the time it was something along the lines of 40 terabytes of disk, because it was two 20-terabyte drives, which I paid a ton for.
Yep.
And the price point came in right about the same. I want to say it was about $3,800.
Yeah.
And I retired that 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, so I mean, it is kind of sticker shock when you look at it, but you think about how long you could repurpose and use this type of build.
Yep.
I think it
and
makes
quite
sense.
honestly, that system ran all my VMs and still continued to run the VMs. And pretty much the only reason I shut that thing off was it was a little on the loud side, but not really that bad. And it lived in the basement, so it wasn't that bad. But the power went out, and I just never went back downstairs and turned it back on.
Yeah.
I've got one in my basement that's got 9 Vantech tornado fans in it. It sounds like a vacuum cleaner when you turn it on. You can hear it. You can hear it on the second floor of our house. It's like.
Well, it's a great point. This build, I mean, Doug, you've seen it in my
modern
office.
Is quiet, yeah. All that stuff's gone.
I don't hear it.
Now
at
you
all.
got those big frame fans that are like slow turning.
Yeah, so that's actually one of my criteria, and I'm glad you actually brought the noise factor up, because if I'm going to build something, I mean, it's okay if you've got a basement to put it in, but I don't. And if I'm going to build something, decibels matter. I mean, I want to keep the noise level down.
Yeah, and you can research that when you're looking at fans and power supplies.
And you should, because you will regret it if you build a crazy loud. You'll be wearing headphones all the time.
Yeah,
because your office or your living room or wherever you're going to put this thing will sound like a server room.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, like my last firewall platform, it was like a Nokia IP 390 or something that I picked up.
410,
and
440.
No, it was a 390, so it was a 1U case. The problem is that when you put Linux on it or pfSense, it doesn't come with the special fan control software, and it hasn't been ported. So the fans spool up at maximum volume.
So the cat's getting sucked up against the case and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, but loud. It was in the basement, and you could literally hear it on the second floor of our house. Sure. So 3 floors up on the completely opposite end of the house.
Yeah. I mean, you can move. So today you can move a lot of air.
Yeah,
for not a lot of money and not a lot of noise, and that's one of the innovations that have happened. Yeah.
So something I've actually done, Larry, and I bet you've done this at one point or other, is got like a big resistor, like at least a like a 5-watt capacity resistor, and put it in line to a fan just to slow it down.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And soldered it in there, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Pull that Molex out and put that resistor in there. It'll slow the fans down if you don't have a controller for it.
Yeah, but I made the mistake of getting a 1/4 watt the first time, and that resistor went poof.
Oops. So I went with AMD. So ultimately, because of limited availability, I wasn't originally going to go with Threadripper, which is AMD's comparison to the Xeon platform. I went with the Threadripper 3960X 24-core 48-thread. These are around $1,400 for just the processor. Doesn't come with anything else but the processor. The next kind of tick up is a 32-core. That was $600 more. And I'll show you my benchmarks at the end. and I think I played my cards right, and it's just like minuscule difference. So I wanted something
can
modern.
Can you say that processor name again? Because I think I got a little aroused. I think
I am running an AMD Ryzen Threadripper 3960X 24-core 38-thread processor.
Oh, baby.
Ultimate Infinity Edition.
I do suggest you start with the processor, right?
You should.
Start there. Choose. And so what I do is I found this, and I forgot to link to the website. Sorry about that. Whoever's website had listed this so kindly. And so I didn't want anything too old, right? But I didn't want the brand new stuff because I believe the 3990X, which is their 64-core version, not only was that really expensive since it came out in February 2020, good luck getting it because I think that's suffering from supply chain issues. There's the 3970X, which was $600 more. That jumps you from 24 to 32 cores from what I chose. But the 0.007 microns, right? You can see like the previous generation, the Colfax released in August 2018, 0.0012 microns, it jumps to 0.007, right? So I knew that there was an architectural change there. So I wanted to be on the latest architecture, maybe not the fastest one in there, but on the latest architecture. So that's how I settled on the 24 cores. And let me tell you, 24 cores is, I mean, it's that's like we were talking earlier. There's not even your software that you're using today often isn't optimized to use even 2 cores sometimes, let alone all the
threads and 24 cores.
Usually software's not optimized for that. So
stop drooling over the 64-core one.
So you'll see my benchmarks at the end, Lee, and I'm not far off the mark. There's not, and you could probably read multiple benchmarks. I didn't see that much difference between 24, 32, or 64 cores, other than like a huge price jump. So that was the processor, and that's what started it all. I'm like, well, and the other thing was I could get this processor. Like, you can buy it today, put it in your cart, and they will deliver it to you, which is nice. So I went with whatever motherboard that was. I forget the model number. I didn't put it on the slide, but this is an Asus motherboard. I haven't noticed too much differences in terms of like reliability necessarily, or speed in motherboards. I mean, motherboards are, they're I mean,
there's good ones and bad ones.
I try and avoid the bad ones. I read the reviews.
But everybody has personal biases on that too. So I have a bias against MSIs because and some people love them, so don't send me death threats. One year we bought like I used to buy 36 motherboards every fall for my class. And
you had a high DOA.
Yeah, and I bought 36 MSI motherboards because they were cheap, and I think we had like 19 of them were bad out of the box, and I was like, never again. Even though I know they're not like that now, and these were cheap. But yeah, Asus.
You got to watch your 1-star reviews of people that said that they were DOA. There's like a certain kind of threshold, like percentage-wise. I'm like, all right, I know like a couple of people are going to get that, right? Yep. But when you see that number kind of creeping up of the number of people that got them and had huge, or they're just dead on arrival, right?
Yeah.
I like this motherboard because it gave me a lot of options with USB. We touched on that earlier. So I got a USB 3.1, 3.2 Gen 2 Type A system in there. I got a Type C port. I got 6 3.1, 3.2 Gen 1s on there as well. So there was some pretty good USB support on there, which was important to me. It supports 256 gigs of RAM. I don't know, going beyond that, Doug, have you?
I have not gone beyond. Well, I have gone beyond that on server side. So we have a server that has more than terabytes of RAM.
That was almost a custom build, right?
I mean, that's an HP. I didn't build it. Yeah. So I'm sure you can get a server motherboard which have other limitations. Like I used to love those TNs that had like 4 processors and stuff. Yeah. But they have all kinds of other limitations because the assumption.
I think with a single processor,
probably 256 for now. That's probably I haven't seen anything bigger than that. You may be able to find something, but I haven't seen anything lately. Because I did look when you built that. I was like, okay, I got to have something bigger. The 512.
Yeah, Doug's like, wait, Paul's PC is faster than mine.
So I was going to say
where that differs.
Hold on, wait, Tyler, and then Joff. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I said where that differs is one of the things to consider is the Intel Optane, where you're actually offloading some of your memory buffer space to the PCIe and NVMe SSD space. So you can actually exceed that 256 with Optane.
Yep, you can.
Yeah, Optane was super awesome. I was concerned about Linux support for that. So in this build, I wasn't.
I probably would be
there.
too.
Yeah. Joff?
No, I think I was going to make a similar comment to Tyler, but the other thing I would say that ASUS motherboards, in all the time that I've ever built PCs, and I haven't done one recently, but I always liked what ASUS was putting out. They're kind of like the Swiss Army knife motherboard. You get a lot of options with them, and you get to pick and choose, the set of features that kind of suits you. So I think that's a really good choice, and I've never had a technical problem with them in the times that I've used them.
They have been pretty solid, Jeff. I'll agree with you there. I think if you're looking into overclocking, a lot of the threads and comments will talk about VRMs. What is VRMs again, Doug? It's like the heating, the cooling, and fan control on your motherboard to support overclocking. It's something like that. I remember looking it up.
I don't know. I don't remember.
That doesn't really apply to me because I'm not
voltage, RPMs, and something else. So you can control
the
different voltage clockings to your memory and your processor, which then allows you to clock up your speeds, and then you have to be able to control your fans and variables for the heat once those voltage regulations.
Voltage regulation management, that is how you overclock the RAM. Because
you'll see a lot of comments from overclockers and gamers going, this board has decent VRMs and that and the other thing. With the processor I chose, I wasn't going to think about overclocking it. I don't feel the need to overclock it.
You got plenty of juice.
You have plenty of juice there. No need to overclock the processor. I do need to do some tweaking to my my RAM speed that wasn't detecting it correctly, but I got to do a little experimenting there. Speaking of RAM, I did, and Doug, I think this was your recommendation, and this is a really interesting thing. There's other measurements of speed other than the frequency that they list, and I don't remember exactly what that is. What is that?
Well,
there's another measurement.
They have the read-write speed of the RAM, so that's beyond that 3600, which is just how fast the bus operates. So so it has to be able to read and write. And then there's like 4 other little speeds that come in there.
I researched those at one point.
Yeah, and they used to, you had to go look up what those settings optimized to, and then a lot of times manually set those 4 numbers so that they fit the right. I don't remember what each number stands for now without looking it up, but yeah, there's other things behind just 3600.
That's the clock frequency.
And
what you told me was, like, don't worry about the other numbers. Get a higher clock frequency, and you're good, right?
That helps because that's how fast it can refresh. So that's how fast it can operate.
And I guess my one tip is, if you're looking at like a DDR4 3200, look at that same class of RAM and what the 3600 will give you, or 3000 versus 3200. Oftentimes, for 20, I think you pointed out one of my builds I sent you. Were like, dude, for like $25 more, you can go from 3200 to 3600, right? So make sure you look at that. So.
And the CL ratings, most of those are for overclocking, specifically the clock latencies.
Yeah.
And so if you're not tweaking your clock latencies on your memory and your processor using VRM, then really you're not gaining a whole lot from those lower clock latencies. The bus speeds are going to be more important to what you're doing.
Right. So I went with G-Skill Trident Z. It seems to be working fine. They all worked. And really cool colors. Actually, Johnny, if you've got I took a couple of pictures. Not very good ones. So that's the front of the case, and we'll talk about the Cooler Master case that I bought.
Oh man, you got like a plexiglass on it, so you can see through it.
On the side, yeah, John. If you go to the next one, I actually took the plexiglass off to get that picture. Yeah, that's the RAM, like cool rainbow colors. Now, I didn't spend a lot of time on the whole lighting system just because I'm like, I want to get it together and use it. Like the cool stuff I want to do is, once I get software on it and I want to run Kali and Windows and do cool stuff with it, people do spend a lot more time with the lighting system and controlling the lighting and things like that. In fact, the one from Best Buy I bought my son actually has a remote control that you can change the colors on all the lights. And so you can spend a lot of time researching and configuring your fan and lighting system within the PC. And really, I mean, that's just for bragging rights, quite honest. It really is. But this RAM happened to come with some really cool kind of rainbowish colors that happen. So, yeah.
So I have one more question, Paul.
Yes.
And it's kind of a silly question, but it's also kind of a serious question. So you've got all these component parts. What do you do for patch management?
I update daily, pretty much daily, on my system. Manually, I don't have a.
You mean like firmware patches, Jeff?
Well, I mean, whatever. My original question was going to be, okay, so how long is this going to last? What's the life expectancy of this thing? And then I'm like, oh well, and then patching. I mean, there's a lot of component parts. How many of them that some of them may of which be firmware based, come with some possibility of needing a patch or an update at some point, and how do you pull all that part of it
usually
together?
Just the BIOS firmware. I mean,
there's other firmware on a lot of the other components, but usually the BIOS firmware UEFI takes.
Has anybody ever seen a video card firmware update?
I think that comes down with your driver updates.
Well, I mean, they have driver updates, so that's at another level. But I mean, like an actual, I don't even know how you would do that. I mean, it almost like you'd have to take the cover off or something. It'd have to have a port on it or something.
Doug,
I always thought it came with the driver. But
the last time when I remember having to do that, and it's been a while, because cracking rig, Dogecoin, the drivers and the utilities for managing those cards would perform the firmware updates for you.
I mean, so you're doing it from the operating system. So I do that all the time. But the lower level one is just really that BIOS. BIOS system.
It's a great point. Also, Jeff, when you first get the motherboard, the first thing you want to do is figure out how to do the firmware BIOS or UEFI update, because mine was like woefully. It was like almost 2 years. Out of date when I took it out of the box.
Just be real careful. That's a good time to do. A good reason to do it right then too is if it bricks it.
Yes,
you can send it back and say, I don't know, it didn't work out of the box. It beats the hell out of me. What's wrong with it?
Usually making a big jump in that first firmware update.
And the other one is be sure and read the BIOS update instructions at the company because sometimes they'll say you can't go from version 1.02 to version 2.79. You're going to have to go from 1.02 to 1.79 to 2.01, and you have to do like 5 separate updates, which I've only seen that a couple of times, and Asus is not bad about that.
Yeah, and newer ones are better with that too.
And they do web based if you want to do that.
If you have Windows, it's easier to update the BIOS. When I was Linux, I had to put. Actually, Asus was really good about reading the file system of my already installed drives, and I just pointed it at the firmware update. And it didn't give you a little utility inside the BIOS.
They must all have that now. So you can actually plug a USB in and it'll read
It's amazing that UEFI BIOS has a nice network stack that's available to access the internet for updates.
That's not scary.
Yeah, it's scary, but it sure makes life easier if you want to do that. So, but it is scary.
I don't know if this BIOS on my system supports that, but I had to download it.
Asus
put
does,
it
Asus will.
It does. It will. Okay. Yep, I didn't use that method.
Do you have to worry about BIOS updates on your NVMe drives?
Not that I noticed.
I've never done that.
And I'm not sure. It begs the question, like in Linux, what could I be missing because I'm Ubuntu? When I was System 76, they include utilities in their Pop OS that does all of the firmware updates, and a lot of their newer systems have an open source actually hardware and associated firmware that they will actually maintain. So when I was updating my System 76, it would be like, hey, you've got firmware updates, and it would update the firmware on my various hardware components that were controlled, like manufactured by System 76. They released the firmware for those open source, and they would have the updates in there. So I think if you were...
It's usually like the Intel management engine, which on Windows would run, but for something like Linux, right, you would have to have either a separate application that is then slipstreamed or compiled for Linux to do that, because the manufacturers are pretty close hold as far as how they do their firmware updates and software
Windows.
flashes.
Let me ask this, and I don't know if you could do this or not. Could you take like I almost always have like a Windows bootable hard drive that's just laying around. I wonder if you could just put a Windows bootable hard drive in there, boot that baby up, do all your firmware updates, and then pull it back out and put your Linux drives back. Because if this is a firmware update.
So Windows to Go is one of the ways that we did that.
Yeah,
Windows to Go is hardware agnostic, but you can actually install the utilities in your Windows to Go USB drive, but there are very specific USB drives for Windows.
I'm glad you said that because I'm totally going to do that now. Because I would miss out.
I think that's a way to beat that Linux problem in the modern age.
If I were to roll it out, I would use System 76 because they give you the facilities to do that and choose hardware that they.
But I did that on a server once with an SSD drive. So I took the SSD drive and I opened the case and just laid the SSD drive that had Windows on it, and I booted it up, and then I did a bunch of updates because we were going to run BSD on that thing. And it was like, and I needed to do a firmware update. And I was like, I don't even know how to do this. And there was no stack. There was none of that stuff. And I was like, this ain't going to work. So
I really like the Cooler Master case, H500 ATX. They do call it a mid-tower case, but there's a lot of room in there.
Big, yeah.
It has two, I forget the exact measurement, you saw it, two honking fans in the front.
It's like 36, 24, 36.
Oh my God, these
120 millimeters.
Yes. These are just massive fans in the front that move a ton. I mean, you can put other fans in it. And those are there for show. Now. Those two big fans in the front. I mean, they're moving tons of air. I also did a Fractal Design Celsius S24. Liquid CPU cooler. I love, and Jeff, your earlier question, I love the self-contained liquid coolers. I've used this one from Fractal Design. I've used Cooler Master liquid coolers before. They vary somewhat in price and size and in that kind of thing. I've had the best luck with kind of like the medium-sized ones. I forget the exact specs. You get the model number there so you can take a look at it. They do make larger ones. And they do smaller ones don't get great reviews. I don't think it actually moves enough air over the radiator. So basically, it's a self-contained system that's moving.
I was going to say it's like a car radiator.
Yeah. Exactly it. It's moving liquid over the processor, and then the warmer liquid goes through the radiator, and the fans are sucking the heat off the radiator.
And Corsair makes cases like that now too. They have sort of self-contained radiator and everything. But I used to have external radiators. I've still got one sitting at school. Right. It was bigger than the radiator when my MG was. It was. I'm not even kidding. It was massive.
Where it gets tricky is you can buy systems, and I don't know if you've done this before, Doug, where you're liquid cooling both your CPU and your GPUs in the same liquid, self-contained liquid. But that requires, from what you said, a lot of planning as to how your case is laid out.
Well, a lot of cases have plug-throughs for that. So they actually have a place where you could push the one I built, which had video and CPU cooling. You plug through, and all the pipes went through the case, had pre-built holes for it. And then it was an external radiator. So the radiator was sitting out on the floor beside it.
Or
beside
it, okay.
The problem we ran into that was... we actually set the radiator outside the window in the winter. Which worked pretty well. And then in the summer, we had to bring it in, and we had to actually set a box fan in front of it to blow air across it to keep it cold. Because that was an overclocked machine. It was video overclocked, CPU overclocked, RAM overclocked. The only thing I've never been able to get working very well was RAM cooling. So if you overclock the hell out of your RAM,
so you can liquid cool.
There's a way
GPU, RAM, and CPU in the same system.
I never figured out how to do it. I got the CPU and the GPUs. I had two GPUs with cooling blocks on them. Had all that stuff running. There was a RAM thing. It was like some kind of radiator. It set on top of the RAM sticks, and it was drawing air up through there somehow. It leaked. It didn't work, and the RAM just cooked. So we were.
So, Job, I've had great luck with self-contained CPU liquid coolers.
I like that idea. I think that's a good one.
One failure. I've done about 10 of those, and I've had one single one and it was just literally the pump motor died.
The video production system here for Security Weekly, I've done a self-contained.
So
liquid
that
cooler.
one dead pump motor out of 10. And Corsair replaced that one. I called them and I said, I think the pump died in this, and they were like, send it to us and we'll replace it, and they did. And
Corsair
they
makes good stuff too.
Actually, that brings up a good point. For the liquid cooling system, Paul, is there some pinouts that the motherboard can actually monitor the status of the cooling?
Yes. Yeah, all of that, especially on this Asus motherboard, which is newer than obviously all the other motherboards I've installed. You can control everything. All your fans and liquid cooling systems all have headers.
It's an awfully good point, though, because a lot of motherboards don't have headers for anything beyond the CPU. So then you're plugging that CPU pump in. But if you've got video cooling blocks and things like that, you may only have 2-pin fan headers, which will work, but you don't get any kind of BIOS monitoring of that stuff. So now you're back to, you don't know what's going on with that if it quits.
Yeah, you don't know what's going to. I mean, and then the worst thing that could possibly happen, of course, is your liquid cooler on your CPU to fail.
Well, on your video,
then you cook your CPU and you don't even know.
Absolutely.
Usually, your motherboard will turn it off when it reaches a certain temperature.
You say
usually.
Usually.
I didn't say all the time. I said usually.
We melted one into a black spot one time.
Oh,
yeah, we turned that off. That feature to shut it. We were overclocking and we forgot we left it running and went to dinner and came back and it literally.
It's a good point. Always make sure that's on as a
we were lucky to burn the house down. I mean, that thing was literally like, it was like a black spot the size of a baseball on the motherboard, and the CPU was like actually cracked. I have no idea how hot that thing got, but it was total devastation.
Yep.
And it was a little crazy. That's called what happens when you drink too much while you're overclocking.
Don't drink and overclock. So power, I used a Be Quiet brand, a 1200 watt full modular. I like the full modular because you pick and choose what you want to feed off of it. And typically you've got more ports on there than you'll use. So if you add something, you save those cables. They come with a plethora of cables. Save all those. I take all my extra parts that I didn't use. I put it in the motherboard box. And I stick it on a shelf, and I store that for the life of the PC. And all my extra parts are in there. If I need to make a change,
very smart,
I can do that. Mine came in everything I put in it. PC part picker, as accurate as that might be, estimated it at 858 watts consumption. So I did a 1200 watt power supply. You always want to add at least a couple hundred extra watts, right? At least
probably 20%. Yeah,
20% more than what your build is.
At least.
And I mean, it lives up to his name. I mean, this fan on the power supply is really quiet, so it makes some pretty good stuff too.
And what does platinum certified actually mean?
I think it's just
it's the stability of the stability of the current. So if you actually put an oscilloscope on the rails, the lower the lower as you go down to gold and bronze and below that, you'll see just like on your electrical outlet, you're going to see more buzz on that current. Does it really matter that much? Probably not. But you'll see a much smoother line on there if you plug an oscilloscope into that.
Graphics card. This was hard. It's sad and frustrating because the RTX 30 series, again, for the value, gets you just an amazing amount of power on your graphics card. And I think it's the 3080s and 3090s are DDR7 and 3060s are DDR6. I read an article about that. I think Goose posted it in the Slack channel. You just can't get them. And some of these cards you're not going to get till next year.
That's why I didn't build. I mean, when you started this, it was like, okay, I can't stand it. I told my wife, so we're doing a build. She's like, oh God, here we go again.
Here we go.
And then I went immediately and I started building to outdo Paul's machine.
And you can't get the parts.
And I was like, every part I picked was like, nope.
So I had actually picked up, and one of the only reasons I think I might have taken on this build is I had a GeForce GTX 1080 Ti that I picked up used for $750 on Amazon. I bought this in December last year. Last month I went to see if I could get that same card because I'm like, maybe I'll do two of those, or maybe I'll get one of these for production and upgrade one of the cards. Not even available. They're like $800 or $900, and it's not a GTX 1080 Ti. It's something else. So I even put a story up on the wiki about that GTX the GTX 970, which is the cards I have right now, which are old. I mean, those things are like they're still decent cards.
They're from 2014. I'll take you on with it. I mean, benchmarking, and you'll beat me if you've got something really modern. But the truth is, for anything I'm doing, they still meet the need. But they were talking about how people are buying them now used because they can't get anything. Right. And if you want to build anything,
because again, I'm not gaming. I may want to do some password cracking, and for $750, I put what would be an $1,800 card in an RTX 3090. I put that into my processor. So let me run more VMs. I want 24 cores. So that's where my budget, kind of went to. And this card works great. I mean, I could game on this guy.
You're not going to have a problem with that. I mean, there is a kind of
like I'm running mostly like Teams and Chrome on 1440p. So
I mean, right. Except for your benchmarking stuff, unless you're a gamer, unless you're crypto mining or password cracking.
Sure.
Honestly, you don't need all this, oomph horsepower like I have. It's crazy. It's stupid, and I spend money on electricity. People on Discord are talking about that right now. But I wanted to build the biggest honking thing I could to benchmark it out.
Yep.
And honestly, if I was smart, I'd go in there and take one of my. I have 2 video cards. I'd take one of them out, and I would still be in good shape. So,
you can't find the frustrating thing is you can't even find the older cards.
No,
now.
You can't get anything.
You can't get anything.
I mean, I literally on PC Part Picker, I was just at a blank. I was back to going, okay, I'm going to be buying low end video cards for this high end system. What's my point here? And that's why I didn't do the build. Right. I'm just going to have to wait.
You're better off taking your existing cards and just moving them to a new build and the upgrading.
That's
exactly what I did. This was in my previous build, so I moved it to the new one.
These cards I moved from a previous build because the motherboard died, and I instead of buying a new video card, spending $3,000, I just use these same 2 video cards because I was like, why?
Right.
I mean, I want them. I want a 3060 because I want one, but I don't need it. It's like buying that souped-up motorcycle.
If you get I like your build, Doug, because if you get 2 in there like you have, you get a ton of ports and you can drive. How many monitors you driving?
I drive 6 27-inch monitors, and I think that's all I can drive with those cards. Yep. But that motherboard I have will support 3 cards, so you can jam 3 cards in there, and then you could support 9 monitors, which was my original design plan because I have a tree that'll support 9 monitors. So I was going to put 3 more up there.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, this is getting a little crazy and stupid, but it looks cool.
It looks cool. That's really why you do it. It looks cool.
But it looks cool.
Yep.
My brother used to have a motorcycle, had a V8 engine on it, and I was like, what do you do with that? And he's like, you park it and let everybody look at it and go, damn,
that's cool. Right. That's the graphics card. Storage, storage is storage. You can always add more storage. Storage is so cheap now.
Yeah.
I mean, for my operating system, I did the NVMe solid state. Samsung 970 Evo Plus is pretty standard, 1 terabyte. I think it's like $89, which is ridiculous when you think about what we used to pay for storage. And you can always add more, right? I mean, I've got
that's for an SSD now. It's $89 for a terabyte.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I feel. Yeah.
And I can put the whole Linux operating system, all my applications, in a pretty hefty suite of VMs, plus some of my backups, from my previous home drives on there, and I still have like 600 gigs free.
My first home hard drive, 10 megs.
Right.
20. I think it was $2,800. It was crazy, and
And the case will support 2 more regular SATA drives in their SSDs. So my plan is eventually I'll upgrade those. I'll put 2 I don't know, 5 terabyte or whatever. I'll put 2 really large ones in there if I need more storage.
Well, I have 2 M2s that are like a terabyte each. One's got the operating system on it. One's a cache system. I have 2 SSDs, which are like rapid, often used apps and things like that. And then I actually have 4
spinning drives, right?
I have 4 8-terabyte spinners in my case, and the spinners are for like storing video, storing stuff I don't use very often, files from classes when I archive them, so I push all that stuff off. And I'll probably downsize that in the future because I have started using AWS to push deep storage stuff.
Glacier's great.
Yeah,
we were just having that conversation, like where do we put the videos from all of the shows? We have multiple. Glacier's great for that.
So all my old class videos are on Glacier now, and I don't need all those spinners, so I'm phasing them out.
Linux software RAID is actually really cool, and I've done that in other builds too. Even if the hardware doesn't necessarily support it, I'll just do a Linux software RAID so that if one drive die, I still have some redundancy.
Most motherboards support that now anyway. I mean, you can at least you run RAID 6 on all those Asus motherboards support RAID on there's usually like at least 4 ports on there that support RAID, that is hardware RAID coming off the motherboard. So,
if that USB is so fast today, you could probably get an external drive array.
You can do that too, or just do a NAS even.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
NAS is cheap now too, so
it is.
Because we have a 32 terabyte NAS in our house that I was originally using for everybody to back up that runs RAID 6.
Yep.
So,
Tyler, you and I went through the Drobo platform inside out in 6 Ways to Sunday. It is a great platform on the Drobo. So, and they're not that expensive either. So.
Hey, if you're running, I don't know what you're running on the system, Paul, but if you run ESX,
Ubuntu 2004.
Doesn't ESX require you to license some extra software if you're doing NAS? I don't think that comes with the free tier, right?
It might not. I'm doing VMware Workstation for Linux, which is a good point, Jeff. I'm actually glad you brought it up. It forced me to upgrade to the latest version before it would work on Ubuntu 2004. So I had to pay my $100 tax to VMware to get it on there. I actually consulted with Tyler on this, and I'm like, can I run VirtualBox? He's like, you can, but you don't want to. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna pay my $100 for VMware. Yeah. So thank you, Tyler.
Your $100 is well spent, and the time you would take to troubleshoot anything else.
Yeah.
So that actually begs the question though, but Paul, and I kind of assumed this anyway, but you're generally using this as a desktop system, but it's kind of a combination server because of all the horsepower that's in it.
Yeah, exactly. So like I've got, for example, today I needed to run WP scan, and I'm like, I could put that on my regular desktop and make sure I go get the latest version and all that. I'm like, or I've got a VM that runs Kali. I cannot touch anything on my desktop, and I've got Kali Linux. Yep. I can update that. I can snapshot that. I can royally screw it up if I want to or by mistake, and it's running in a VM. I can revert to snapshot and all that stuff. So
one of the other nice things with VMs that way too is it's a great way to segment host and client network traffic. If you have dedicated NICs, we would always remove all networking, supply dedicated NICs via either USB or onboard that didn't touch anything other than client networks, and that was a dedicated, essentially physical box that hooked into something that the host didn't actually do anything to.
Right. Some of the motherboards that I looked at did have a 10 gigabit Ethernet as well as a gigabit Ethernet. I didn't necessarily have a use case for 10 gigabit.
Yours comes with a 2.5 gigabit.
Yeah. Is that what's in this one?
Yeah.
I get confused. I looked at so many different motherboards.
So that's interesting that you say that, Paul, because at home I'm still running the laptop for my main work machine, but I use 10 gigabit on it, and I use a 10 gig switch and 10 gig into my ESX server.
Nice.
And when you move data back and forth, that really does make a big difference.
Yeah, because you got more lanes of travel.
Yeah, exactly. And I had to do a lot of tuning for that. You got to go up to 9600 byte MTU.
Right. Yeah.
Because you won't get the throughput across your network unless you do that. If you're at 1500 bytes, it's not going to happen. You're going to get maybe 3.5 gig at best. But I can get full line rate speed to my ESX server. So, you copy a great big ISO over there, and it's like 300 megabytes a second.
No, that's good to know, because as we start to move towards 4K here in the studio and record in 4K, we might need to move those 4K files around.
Yep,
that's a great use case.
That's a lift.
Yeah, you're gonna have to tune the network gear. All your switches need to be configured.
Yep.
For increased MTU, and so does your endpoint gear, and then you've got to actually test it appropriately. It takes a little while to get it tuned
there.
Just right.
Good to know. So then we come to the benchmarks. I ran Geekbench.
Before you do the benchmarks, there's one piece of critical hardware, maybe two pieces of critical hardware that I think you're missing, but one near and dear to my heart. And those two pieces are your input devices and your monitor.
Oh, good point. I run an LG monitor at 1440p. I forget the exact model number. I'm pretty happy with that. My keyboard here in the office is it begins with an F. Philco? Is it a Philco? I think it's a Philco. It's in my Amazon history somewhere. And I like the Logitech Hero 502 Gaming Mice. They're about $50. They're the ones that come with the weights, and so you can weight them differently. I've bought 5 of those. Like, both my kids have them for gaming, and I have them on all my systems. I just love that mouse. Philco what is it? Magis Touch 2. I forget the Cherry MX Browns or something on there. They're not the full red clicky ones, because when I'm on conference calls. At home, I do the Drop Control. Is that the $200 one? Drop Control is my other favorite keyboard. And I got the default keycaps with my recent one that I bought for my workshop. And I like aftermarket keycaps. I think spending that extra $100 on the aftermarket keycaps, I'm like, no, it really does justify the $100, Larry. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So I say near to my heart, because I just did this one. This is the Drop alt mechanical keyboard with the Red Suns GMK Red Samurai keycap set.
Oh, how do you like the Samurais? I've been eyeing those, Larry, because those are like 100 and change, right, for the for the keycaps.
Yeah, I love them.
It makes a difference. I know it sounds crazy.
We just did the same keyboard with a different keycap set for my daughter for making honor roll last section because she's starting to do Twitch streaming and stuff. But my daily driver is the Mito Laser Alt high profile keyboard.
Nice.
And I turn it upside down, but this thing is it's like a brick.
Yeah, it's heavy.
It's heavy, and it doesn't move. So,
Larry, you bring up great points. If you're going to build a system like this, and like all of us, we spend all of our time in front of our computer, typing on our keyboard, clicking with our mice. Choose quality components.
Yeah, you'll be sorry.
You're going to spend $200 or $300 on a keyboard, and you're going to spend at least $50 on a mouse.
I usually have six cheap, just totally cheap shit keyboards laying around that they're backup plans for when something breaks or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you the Philcos and things, you just can't. I love those keyboards.
Yep.
And they're loud sometimes when that's why I have the power mute. So
I like the clicky. I like the clicky.
Yep. I like the clicky too, and I like the weight of it because it's just got that right feel to it. So it's definitely my favorite. And
for the clicky, so in both of those keyboards, I have the Kaihua Box White.
Ooh, nice.
And I will tell you that I run Crisp with a K on my systems that do audio, and it filters out all the background keyboard noise.
Nice.
So,
yeah.
Hey, Paul, can you revisit the monitor for a second? Do you have one that is a curved monitor?
I have an LG curved, and I can send you the model number. I don't have it offhand.
Is it an ultra wide, or is it narrower than that? Because I've got an ultra wide. I mean, it's just curiosity. I've got an ultra wide, and it's like almost the length of my standing desk. It's crazy.
Yes. I like 34 UC80. I think is the one I have here in the office. Okay. But John Stren and I have the same monitor, the Samsung 49-inch widescreen curved monitor. When John first said, "Dude, you got to get this," it was $1,100. Black Friday, I got it for $900, and that's my monitor at home. And
that's the 34-inch. That's the right call.
Yeah,
because
34-inch
I've got the wider
good.
one, and I think there's almost too much real estate on the 40-plus inch.
Yeah. Monitor's personal preference. I know Doug likes to have the 6.
I got my 327s on 327s above them.
And it's more, but the 49-inch widescreen monitors, you can get them. Samsung makes a few different models. If you're not gaming, you don't need that high of a refresh rate necessarily. Yeah. Sometimes it's preference. You're going to pay more, the more refresh rate. But the 49-inch.
I mean, honestly, I would switch to those if I could afford it. I was telling Paul,
it's a big chunk of change. I was $900 for.
I was telling Paul earlier, like I got those 6 ViewSonics, which are super nice, high refresh rate monitors, but I got them for
a deal.
They were sitting around in my lab down at school. We weren't using them anymore, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take these home and put them on a tree.
Right.
And I mean, if I was having to buy something, I think I would definitely go off. I do like more real estate rather than less because I'm sloppy and messy, and I like to hang lots of stuff up there while I'm doing things.
You want a good quality.
I am too. I've got a 49 ultra wide. I've got the big one, but my challenge. I'm bragging. My challenge with it is vertically.
Yes.
You don't get much on them.
Yes.
You get a lot of width, which is great for gaming. But the vertical side actually bothers me a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great
length
point.
and girth is important.
It's important.
That's why for code and stuff, I use a vertical monitor. I just have a 27-inch vertical monitor that I put next to my ultra wide.
Yeah.
No, that's smart.
No, for coding, I completely 100%, Tyler.
You want the height.
When I wrote a lot of code, I did have a vertical monitor there that I used for the code space because I did like that.
Yeah.
Now, it was just a regular monitor that was turned on its side.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It was like I would say, with the big curved monitor. So if I was doing that, if I was just going to be a coder, I would probably go with what he was talking about with the vertical on one side and then the smaller curve monitor, for your just general purpose things. So I like that idea.
Yeah. And see, Dr. Doug and I are very similar in that, for a while I had 3 27s and then 4 17 4x3 profiles up above, but I switched that out recently. So now I've got 4 27s. And
how can you handle the gap though? But
it doesn't bother
what bothers me about multiple monitors is the big freaking seam between each one of them. Right?
I actually like the seam. The seam just breaks it up. It's like this monitor's for this purpose, this monitor's for this purpose, and I've got all what I'm working on right now is right in front of me, and I got these other monitors I can window. And I get it, but I actually didn't like. I did try a bigger monitor, and I actually like the seams. They just break up what I'm doing and isolate it.
I think we're saying is a lot of it is preference.
It is. It's just personal preference.
Yeah. You got to build and design to your preference.
Yeah, and for me, every one of those monitors is a different system that does some different function at a different time.
Yep.
So you've got a natural
my personal
breakout
laptop
there.
And my work laptop, and one that does some software-defined radio stuff all the time, and a Windows box that does software-defined radio stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And one for media, and so. Yeah, so having them separate is like essential there.
Just a closing note, very quick benchmarks. I just ran a quick Geekbench 5 scoring system. I was 23,275 on my multi-core score, which put me, according to their average benchmarks, right between the Threadripper 32-core and Threadripper 64-core, and slightly above the Intel Xeon. Again, these are benchmarks, and it's just one benchmark, and a benchmark is a benchmark. It's not actually how it performs in the real world, so take all of that with a grain of salt. But when I had not actually benchmarked the system before today for preparation for this segment, and I was like, yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy with my processor performance. I don't think you could ask for much more for the value and what you can run. So
I like it.
Yeah. Again, my complete build, PCPartPicker.com. Link is in this slide. It's also linked to in the show notes. Again, I mean, you're going to spend north of $4,000 for a system in this caliber. You can, of course, build a system for much less and take all the tips and tricks and kind of
build
personal preference. Yeah, build for what you need, and all. I think we highlighted all of those different kind of decision points in this segment. So not the best time necessarily to build, depending on what you're after, but I went with what was available, and I'm super happy with my system. Yeah, so I guess that's what it's all about. As long as you're happy.
As long as you're happy.
So Paul, what do you call a singing computer?
What's that, Larry?
Adele.
Oh, no.
I liked it. With that, security news coming up next. We're retaking the term hacker. Stay tuned.